Marine reacts to Warhammer 40k, full beginner's guide, plus every major faction by Luetin09. As always, I'm going to be posting the link to the original video and channel down in the description below, so go ahead and make sure that you check them out. Alright, real quick, as you can tell with the list in the top 5, we're going to kind of be going back to back as far as Warhammer and SCPs. I'm generally trying to get an idea of just who the factions are, kind of get an idea, a little bit of each one, and then after that start branching off into the different races and try to get to know them more in depth. I'm also at first going to be primarily looking at little things that have really interested me for a while, as far as what it takes to really become a Star Day or Space Marine. And I'm also curious to see more about the Imperial Guard, because I've heard from many people that that's kind of more as far as what the military today would look like. Like, these people aren't super genetically enhanced, no augmentations, nothing. They're just people with armor, and I mean, if they have armor, and then guns. And this isn't necessarily the best type of equipment, it's not the best weaponry. And I keep thinking about that, and I keep thinking, wow, this is just like the Marines, right? Doing a lot more with a lot less. So for the next week or so, I'm going to be doing things that really catch my interest on specific topics. And as far as to how my understanding of this universe is starting to come together, it's obviously, man, it's so much bigger than what I originally thought, and the way people describe it. That I seen a comment say about the Imperial Guard, I think it was that if you survive a week, you're considered a veteran. Can you imagine? I mean, it's hard to even explain, or at least for someone barely coming into this universe, it's hard to even think of that. But before we get into the actual video, don't forget to like, subscribe, it really does help me out a lot. Hit that notification bell right there, where you get notified every time I do upload. Sometimes I'll upload twice a day, typically working on them in the mornings and releasing them in the late afternoon to late evening. That way when y'all get off work, you can enjoy these videos at your leisure. So, without further ado, let's go ahead and see what this full beginner's guide, plus every major faction video, is all about. I remember seeing this comment a lot recently. Real quick. The Emperor of Man, the Carrion Lord, for whom 1,000 souls die every day, human blood, human flesh, the stuff of which the Imperium is made, forgot the promise of progress and understanding, for there is no peace among the stars. The universe is a big place. Whatever happens, you will not be missed. That is a just disturbing way to look at it. I mean, I understand like the vastness of not only the factions, but as far as like just the locations, you will not be missed. Like, it's crazy. Like, we think we're very small now in the world, or compared to the whole world. But imagine a universe.
Welcome to the first in my series of primers focused on the universe of Warhammer 40,000. If you're watching this, you may well be brand new to the all-encompassing hobby we call 40k. But what is it? What's it all about, and why should you consider looking into it any further? Well, for one reason, in recent times, people's appetites have been reawakened to highly immersive TV series like Game of Thrones, or movie franchises with a decent backstory. 40k goes considerably far beyond these examples. It is one of the biggest miniature wargames in the world, and features an ever-evolving story that expands in written text, video games, and of course its original and arguably most important feature, the miniatures and its tabletop game. It is created and owned by Games Workshop, a UK-based company producing tabletop games and associated materials. Now I will cover elements of 40k as briefly as I can today, but I won't skimp on detail just for the sake of time. It's as to the point as I can make it, but if you want to know more about specifics, here on my channel I've covered in detail some of the core background areas of the game, which is continuing to expand. I'll also be continuing to produce these short primers to the world of 40k, and I'll also be continuing to make the longer form content which is featured regularly here on the channel. Often referred to by those already consumed by Warhammer 40,000 as the hobby, 40k is not one thing to one person. It is a highly detailed narrative spanning multiple empires, from world-ending galactic campaigns to lowly individual soldier stories. It is a series of usually middle-of-the-road video games with a few standout gems. It's a hobby of addictive miniature painting and crafting, and it is a tabletop wargame now established for over 30 years. It has spawned a variety of smaller games designed to be played without acquiring a huge army. Games.
I've always seen this game. I don't remember. It came out years ago. I never tried it though, but I'd be very curious to try it now, just to get the feeling of being a Space Marine. Let me know down in the comments below if you would want to see some gameplay for this, because, I mean, even if you don't, this is still something I'm going to play on my own, at least.
Like Space Hulk, Necromunda and Kill Team, and these often require only say 6 to 10 pieces per side and are very accessible for new players, whereas standard Warhammer 40,000 tabletop may require larger armies with many pieces. Now before we come to the lore, it is worth looking at the original tabletop game, as this will give you a better understanding of just everything about it. If you've never seen or encountered a tabletop game, this is not important, it's actually very simple. Usually 2 players will engage in a battle.
Please tell me that this is only like a picture that they took to show how much pieces they have, because this entire thing, everything here is not the battlefield, right? Like this is like the whole thing isn't the actual board. Although it does look like that because it looks like these walls and this little thing right here. I mean, even the board game looks like it's insanely expansive. This has got to be a picture, man, just for picture's sake, not the actual tabletop. Like someone's not playing right here, right?
Simple. Usually 2 players will engage in a battle laid out on a table at your home or a gaming venue. The area of play will be set with terrain pieces, often crafted and painted by the players, and they will alternate turns moving their miniature soldiers or vehicles, and will resolve engagements through random dice rolls according to specific rules and combinations of preset unit stats. There may or may not be a mission for one side to achieve, and these games can be highly strict or open to player interpretations. Players will usually paint their miniature soldiers for use on the battlefield, and these can be in a variety of factional designs and colours. Some people prefer their involvement in 40k to be focused entirely on this hobby of painting, designing and modifying these miniature units, and this part of 40k can be just as all-consuming as the lore or the tabletop. Some choose to split their time between each part, or devote all their hobby time to one piece of the whole 40k hobby, be that the lore, tabletop or the painting designing element. Now comes the challenge for me, summarising 40k. So Warhammer 40,000 is set in the distant future, a future beset by galactic war, from a skirmishing city turf war level through to planetary conquest and system-wide campaigns fought through its space and planets. It is far more pessimistic than most other deep lore universes, and also regularly borders on what you would describe as space horror. Now 40k is primarily focused around humanity, which has through many thousands of years achieved an unimaginable level of technology, and then lost the majority of this zenith through a devastating war. Humanity after this ancient war was left broken and fragmented across the galaxy. It would be later reunified by one godlike individual known as the Emperor of Man, and he would set in motion the new order for mankind known as the Imperium of Man. But a devastating civil war known as the Horus Heresy would befall mankind before the Emperor could complete his goals for humanity, and he would instead now become a living corpse enshrined on Earth or Terra. Humanity would become shattered by this civil war, and after a slow, painful recovery, it has become for the longest time a stagnant civilization. Suffocating under its own bureaucracy, the Imperium has begun making the smallest steps toward advancement in the most recent days of its history, but it still stands as a strange juxtaposition of ancient tech that is beyond the comprehension of many of its citizens. It is a weak and precarious civilization, simultaneously able to wield immense military power. Humanity itself, through thousands of years of conflict with alien races, who are more often than not excessively hostile, has become a highly xenophobic race. It views almost all other races as needing to be exterminated and has almost no morals or ethics as to how this is to be achieved. The galaxy-spanning empire of humanity is essentially a totalitarian state that worships the Emperor of Man. The Imperium of Man has large, if not complete, control over its citizens, including many aspects of their lives, economy, social life, education, private lives, science, and indoctrination into its ideology. Any who are not seen to be a follower of the Emperor may and will be persecuted as heretics, and this is often largely open to interpretation and leads to large-scale abuses of power and executions. The Imperium uses this deeply entrenched worship and imperial ideology to control and mobilize mass populations of its citizenry for its armies like the Imperial Guard and Imperial Fleet. It also will utilize its citizens to fulfill whatever role is needed. These roles can, and often are, fairly unpleasant, especially when the rule of law is often severe and absolute. Humanity also wields in its arsenal the Emperor's greatest gift, the military sledgehammer known as the Imperial Astartes. These are the iconic Space Marines, genetically enhanced superhuman warriors who represent the pinnacle of human modification and military power. Their forces have access to some of the most powerful weapons and force multipliers humanity wields. Much of this tech is ancient and requires careful care and repair by specialists dedicated to retaining this critical knowledge. But as powerful as humanity is, even with its small progression in its most recent times, it still stands on the edge of annihilation by various alien races or entities. Humanity somehow has survived to this point despite being on an almost permanent risk of complete destruction and forced extinction. Within the lore, this has nearly happened on multiple occasions, and what is left of humanity now in the Imperium of Man are the remnants of those survivors, a highly ignorant, fearful people in a fairly constant state of decay where critical technological information is often lost. The Imperium and humanity's primary goals are to locate lost technology from the zenith period of mankind, known as the Dark Age of Technology, otherwise referred to as the Golden Age. It also focuses upon the continued defense and expansion of its territories, and of course the extermination of all alien races, known collectively as the Xenos.
Okay, before we get into that next group, from what I've been seeing in the comments as well, many people say that as far as the Emperor is concerned, he's being kept alive. And he's been alive for quite some time. I'm pretty sure it was thousands of years as of right now. But many people were saying that he didn't want religion being a big factor. He didn't want to be seen as God. Apparently he was like atheist. And eventually people started still worshiping him as one. And it also seems like he was legitimately trying to do good. But then obviously things happened. They also talked about, as far as humans being very xenophobic, and that they've come to the brink of complete annihilation several times. Honestly, this whole little section right here, especially with the Imperium of Man and the Orcs, this is more like just trying to refresh my memory, but also point out things for myself at least to like really get into a little more of that detail, because since we really have some information on them. As far as the other races are going to go, it's going to be a little more difficult. It's going to be on the spot trying to gather everything. But the Imperium of Man, and they talked about the zenith time period, and they also talked about how in there was that golden age of like dark technology where they had I didn't really hear too much detail about it, but like it was so advanced, but then it was either disappeared or broke down. I'm not really sure what happened, and that they're trying to find that as well. And just once again, they really stress to show you how whenever there's so many people, it seems, I mean, especially in this universe, it seems that the value of life is going to be very, very diminished. I mean, and that's going to be a sad future if 100 years or 1,000 years down the line, that's kind of how this world ends up. It'd be very, very dark and very sad, but excited to know what the Xenos are about. According from this picture, it doesn't look very good.
Because humanity has become so violently and ignorantly xenophobic in the far future, it also has no qualms about committing planetary levels of genocide. If you're not human
Exterminatus
and don't worship the Emperor, then you are the enemy, a heretic, and must be exterminated. Diplomacy is almost not a thing for the Imperium, and the usual recourse is to just shoot on sight. In fairness though, there was a time where humanity had attempted a more diplomatic approach, but this over time has just disintegrated, with most of its contact with aliens resulting in some kind of conflict. It now simply believes all other life must be extinguished, or at the very least dominated and enslaved for work or experimentation. These cases are usually quite rare. There are 6 other races that are seen as the enemies of humanity. Any of these factions can be played by you within the tabletop game of 40k, or models for collecting and painting. Some players will dedicate themselves entirely to one faction, building it up, fleshing it out to the limit of their model making ability, and others may have multiple armies of different factions.
Didn't get too much on the Xenos. But as far as them saying, like, with diplomacy, sure, yeah, diplomacy is always a good thing, at least in my opinion, to try to achieve first, if it's possible. But considering that you'd be dealing with, like, different life forms from a completely different planet, you never really know how those interactions would go. And then I guess it really comes down to the whole thing they say about being xenophobic, being fearful. You're seeing this other race, they have this technology, maybe it's better than what you have, maybe it's less, maybe they have more beings than you. But then it just seems to really come down to the type of mentality, well, we might not get a second chance. We either attack them first or they're gonna attack us first, right? Do you want to be the aggressor or do you want to be the one that's defending? And obviously that could have its own complications. So what I'm starting to see, especially in these universes, the only way to ensure everything runs smoothly or that there's peace is that you yourself have to be like kind of like the quote-unquote big man on the block, right? And then that's the only way to ensure that at least you're the one in charge and you could at least see things are done in your own way or fashion. But yeah, we'll see what the Necrons are about.
The Necrons are a very ancient race, strange creatures that appear like metallic skeletons. They're actually formed of living metal. They span the galaxy and are in a continuing state of awakening from their tombs after many thousands of years of sleep. They seek to rebuild their empire and dominate the galaxy. One of their key abilities is that of reanimation. They can reassemble themselves after death and fight on. They're also generally mindless automatons. How this came to be is another story.
Okay, that was really quick. All right, so robots. Obviously, he said it's another story, so he's probably not going too far into detail with that. I'm curious to see why they were in their sleep, and just see if there's actually some form of leadership within that faction, or if they're just kind of robotic and doing things as that was already programmed in their directive to just do. Or maybe they woke up because all these races started coming into contact with each other. And maybe they're protecting something. No idea.
Now, Games Workshop has seen fit to recently rename some of its units, largely it seems for legal reasons, but since forever this faction has been known as the Eldar. More recently it is known as the Aeldari, but basically it's the Eldar. These are derived from the elves of many more fantasy games and are basically space elves. Despite this quite simplistic analogy, the Eldar have a rich and tragic lore. Because of past disasters that have left the Eldar with no homeworlds to speak of, they now travel the galaxy in vast ships known as craft worlds. The Eldar wield powerful weapons, but are generally physically weak, and they also have immense arrogance towards other races. Their defining feature, and to some degree their biggest flaw, is that the Eldar are very powerful when it comes to psykers and psychic abilities drawn from the warp.
Alright, so space elves. No planets to speak of. He obviously didn't say why that's the case. Did they blow it up themselves? Did the humans do it with the exterminatus? God, I'm going to be pronouncing all these words wrong. Also, as far as these ships go, to contain an entire race, they've got to be pretty insanely huge to the point where it's like many cities or countries. And I don't know. I'm just trying to picture in my head like kind of what kind of the ship layout would look like. And it said that they're very weak physically, but that they're very powerful against psykers, which are like someone mentioned it being space wizards. The Drukhari. Okay, these guys are really look freaky.
The Dark Eldar are essentially space pirates who live lives of excess and sadistic torture porn. Anyone who looks like they're about to be captured by the Dark Eldar is rarely something that you would want to contemplate, and suicide would generally be significantly preferable.
Alright, so these space pirates, and those guys just look like the dudes from Hellraiser, right? So yeah, not really too much on the space pirates. Okay, I know this might sound messed up, but I would be curious to know like what kind of torture they actually do, or like, just at least get to know more like how and why they do these things. If it's just something, I'm not sure if he said they get pleasure off of this, or if it's just something they do to like maybe intimidate their enemies, or if it's just like a tradition or just something that they do. Go ahead and see what the chaos is about.
A faction of many faces and contradicting goals, Chaos is as its name describes, and it originates from the parallel dimension known as the Warp. And this dimension is a reactive plane of existence that absorbs the most powerful emotions and desires of mortal creatures. The reactive Imperium would lead to the birth of entities of godlike power, the Chaos Gods. They each focus on specific mortal desires. Khorne is the god of blood, representing war, rage, and hatred. Tzeentch is the Changer, representing ambition, scheming, conspiracy, and sorcery. Nurgle is the Plague God, representing mortality, morbidity, and despair. And Slaanesh is the god of lust, greed, excess, pleasure, pain, and perfection. The continuing desires and emotions of the galaxy's inhabitants sustain these entities. However, they also reach out into the mortal realm through their manifested entities made from the warp known as demons. And these hellish creatures are enough to send ordinary citizens insane on sight. They're backed by traitors to the Imperium, the corrupted Chaos Space Marines. The gods of chaos and their agents can also infect the minds of mortals, and often cults and worshippers may spring up on planets across the Imperium. This is again one reason why the Imperium of Man is so ruthless about purging heretics. While chaos itself in the material world appears as one enemy that simply wages war, it is in fact in an internal conflict within itself. Each of the Chaos Gods fights for domination over the others, and this occupies the majority of their focus and energy. Each god's ultimate goal is complete domination of the Imperium, a goal which seems unattainable and dangerous to their own existence were it to come to pass. Chaos is one of the most varied and pervasive forces in 40k and has many forces operating under its banner, some dedicated to a specific god, others that simply worship chaos undivided. Okay. The Orcs. Holy shit. This is like Lovecraftian type deals right here, and that the only way that they're not really, I mean, then again, we're dealing with dimensions now, and I finally understand what the warp that people have been commenting is about, but that the four are fighting amongst each other, which is taking up a lot of their time. Imagine if there was only one then, and then that one had the chance to come. You know what? I thought the Imperium of Man was overpowered at first. I thought some of the other races may have been overpowered just depending on how they looked and what people were saying. But Chaos, I think someone mentioned it and summed it up pretty well. When everyone's OP, nobody's OP except for these guys. So that's where the demons are coming into this. Who thinks of this? Who has the mind to think of all this? I would love to see if there was any expeditions or scenarios where some other races actually went into their world or like their dimension and kind of see what happens. Also, real quick with the Orcs, I've heard that these are supposed to be like the boys, like, and that apparently someone said that they have Cockney accents. I don't know, just everything that people have been saying. Like, there's something like people keep saying "wah." I don't know. It seems like this is one of the more people have been commenting as far as them saying like pure-hearted race. It's not they hate anybody. It's just that they do what they love to do, and that's to have war. So now everybody knows the Orcs, right? Middle-earth and all that crap. Not these Orcs. These are more Mad Max Fury Road crossed with British football hooligans, and then you're in the right ballpark. Also in space. Space Orcs are likely a genetically designed species focused for hyper-violence and to be almost impossible to permanently exterminate. They are as hilarious as they are dangerous, and their entire society focuses around casual violence. The Orcs though are also probably the most sunny and optimistic of all races, strangely. Their genetic disposition sets them to see things as generally good and enjoyable, especially when it comes to fighting. And they never really see failure as a negative because it means you just get to have another go later. They also operate more on instinct by design than learned knowledge, and their willpower becomes more powerful the more Orcs are present, meaning when they are collected en masse, they can literally will things to be true by collective belief. They also have a strange ability to just cobble together vehicles and weapons from scrap. They also have no real governing structure. Leaders are chosen by progressively being better at smashing their rivals' heads in, until an Orc eventually reaches the position of being a war boss. When Orcs collect in huge numbers, they may launch a massive campaign of raiding and attacking anything that's not Orc by launching a warg, essentially a huge, no-holds-barred slaughter fest. Anything in the way, best dig in or get the hell out.
That was a big thing too. Someone said, a couple people said this was, that as far as if an Orc starts getting like a lot of popularity, I guess, or like he just has so many successful campaigns and more Orcs start to follow them and they start thinking of him like, damn, this guy's immortal, he can't die. That eventually that willpower actually ends up keeping that Orc alive. And that's just another thing as far as willing things to just kind of work, depending on how many Orcs are in the area. And actually believe it. But also, as you said, they do seem optimistic, and you kind of gotta respect their don't give up attitude. If they fail, they try again. Also, I've heard that they can't sometimes even remember how the first time they failed, so they still end up doing it the second time a different way. The Tau, though, I've been hearing a lot of cool things about the Tau.
The Tau are one of the newer races and are fast learning that the galaxy is not a friendly place. The Tau operate similarly to the Orcs on a more optimistic level, but that's about as far as their common ground with the Orcs goes, because the Tau exist on the fringe of the Imperium and are unusual as they actively encourage other races to join their cause. They collectively follow an ideology known as the greater good. This is their guiding principle that working together is better than working against one another, as this leads to a stronger, more peaceful society. However, anybody who disagrees with this best prepare for war. To be fair though, the Tau do usually attempt significant levels of diplomacy before declaring their target a lost cause. Their military is largely focused around technology and ranged combat, something often mocked and derided by their enemies. The Tau themselves are comparatively weak and use other races absorbed into their faction to fight in close quarters.
They seem like the most logical and reasonable race so far, but it always seems like every kind of group has the mentality of, if you don't do the things the way we do, you're going to get steamrolled. But then again, the Tau, obviously I didn't get too much information on them, just more that they're peaceful and that they try to get races to work together. I'm curious to know what other races they have gotten together. Have they gotten Orcs to work together? Have they gotten some man? Yeah, I'd be very curious to just see how some of these diplomacy matters actually went, or how they've been able to at least contact every other race. Tyranids? I've heard some people have been waiting for me to see these guys or things. I hear Tyranid and I think of spiders. I'm butchering that name. Let's see if I'd join them. Also, comment down below to see which faction would you join if given the chance.
Tyranids are an unusual exception to all previous Xenos.
I take that back.
They do not operate on an ideology, a political structure, or debatably a single leader. They are the most Xenos of Xenos and have begun a steady invasion of the galaxy. They are presumed to have arrived from beyond the borders of the known galaxy and are hostile in the extreme. They do not wield any technology as we would understand it, or their ships, forces and weapons are biological in origin. Tyranids are one of the most nightmarish factions within 40k. Their singular goal is biomass, that is to strip planets of all biological and mineral materials, leaving them barren, dead husks. They assault planets with extreme prejudice and will not cease their assault unless they are damaged to a point where their acquisition of biomass becomes negative to that being expended. They use all material to birth their forces on their vast bioships and recycle their own units by dissolving them back into the pool of biomass, which then they draw to create anything else they may need. They absorb the genetics of all that they encounter and use this to evolve and create more hostile and efficient creatures and biomachines to achieve their goal. They may also seed and infect planets ahead of time to often use the planet's own inhabitants against themselves when the Tyranids arrive to destroy the world. The Tyranids are controlled en masse by something called the hive mind. This is essentially a broadcasted collective consciousness that enables them the powerful skill of being able to operate as one, but made up of millions of individual entities across a planet. The Tyranids are horrific, seemingly unstoppable, and have already wrought terrible destruction upon many others across the galaxy. Many rumour that their already devastating campaigns are only the initial scouting parties to the Milky Way galaxy, and if this is true, the Tyranids could be the ones to end everything.
They're essentially monsters in a monster-riddled universe. I don't know, not too much to say about them besides the fact that I wouldn't want to be a part of them. But it seems like there's certain threats, specifically with this one, they say they're extremely hostile. I would like to see some battles as far as them going against a different race. Because they say they operate in a hive mind. I don't know, it just seems to bring a lot of very curiosity as to see not only how much they've accomplished, but like how the interactions with some of the other races have actually been. Because that's one race, from what I saw, that definitely kind of needs to go. So Psychers, so these are like the space wizards that I've been hearing.
While not wanting to touch on the subject of psychic power too strongly in this video, many factions in 40k feature what are known as Psychers. These are essentially individuals who can wield what you might describe in other universes as magic powers. Some factions have strong Psychers and others have none, and these powers are drawn from the parallel dimension known as the Warp or the Imperium. Individuals who can use these powers do so at considerable risk, as the warp is an unstable and dangerous realm. The relationship between real space and warp space is a complicated one and can affect many aspects of life in the far future, but this is something best covered in another video.
Also, real quick, I just keep getting my words mixed up as far as race and factions, because technically a faction could be in a race, right? Like, you have the Imperium of Man, or like just men in general, but then you can have different factions as far as the Space Marines, the Imperial Guard, or they all consider still like part of the same thing. Because technically they're two separate groups, although they're on the same side, I could assume. But this is we'll see what final thoughts.
The takeaway for you today is that Warhammer 40,000 is a world of vast-scale warfare and complex interfactional and internal factional power struggles. 40k is by its very nature often absurd to the extreme. Sometimes this can be somewhat detrimental to its own narrative, because when everything is supersized and extreme in the extreme, suddenly everything looks kind of the same, and then it becomes arguably less impressive. However, 40k just owns its own absurdity, and it's something that you just have to roll with and suspend your disbelief. For many who are obsessed with 40k, the hyper-violent, xenophobic, genocidal nature of its occupants is largely a source for much dark humour. Most people that are into Warhammer, they don't take it too seriously, but it is also fun to take things in 40k very seriously, because it contains so much detail. But simultaneously, there are many memes and pure nonsensical comedy that comes from 40k because of just how extreme it is. The classic It Sounds Like Heresy being one such example, whereby anyone who dissents from the official line of thinking is declared a heretic and executed on the spot.
I have been seeing that comment a lot.
One that I enjoy using all the time in the comments. And the key theme of 40k is purely about war. The lore is a vast, all-encompassing backdrop that stands on its own, but 40k for itself is all about the galactic wars that are unending. It's focused this way because it represents the background for a tabletop war game that is surprisingly about factional war. 40k itself operates on a fairly healthy dose of irony. Much of the events and organizations, forces and individuals often are the result of half-truths or pure indoctrination, and some of those that are held up as heroes are not what they appear to be, and as usual the context of events are very important, but many things can end up being actually quite subjective. The fact that the Imperium itself has, through its devout worship of the Emperor, now has its state religion embedded in almost everything it does, which is hilarious when you consider the Emperor of Man set out to eradicate religion from humanity entirely. Warhammer
So the thing about him being an atheist then was right.
40k draws from a lot of historical events and ideologies. It also borrows heavily from other settings like Dune, 2000 AD, Lovecraftian influence, obviously Tolkien, and even older texts like Milton's Paradise Lost and the Divine Comedy with Dante and the Inferno. 40k has continued to be fleshed out over time, and it shows no signs of abating. If anything, it's moving forward at a faster pace than ever. It is a universe that has consumed me for some 30 years, and I highly recommend that you allow the darkness of the far future to enter your life. You may live to regret it, but you will undoubtedly enjoy it.
Alright, let's talk about that for a minute. So, some of the races have a little more detail, a little more fleshed out in this video, as far as what they're about, kind of what they're doing, their interactions with other races. Some of them are very short, but at least now I kind of know who like the characters are. I mean, obviously not the characters, but like just what the factions are and like what's going on, and kind of also seeing like where everyone kind of stands, which is really good, because then when I start seeing other videos that go more into detail, I can at least like start to really piece together things in my mind. But I mean, honestly, I got everything. I made sure to try to get everything I was thinking in the video itself, because I know at this point I'm probably not going to remember everything. But it seems to me that the biggest threat as of right now, from what I saw, out of all the different races, is probably chaos. Just because of the way they described it, what they're capable of, and the fact that it's playing with dimensions. So, and I'm assuming that's where that Lovecraftian part was coming from. I will say though that the part about saying anything that doesn't sound right, or as far as just anything right. Ah, God, what's the way to say it? As far as not saying anything right on a certain subject, and someone says heresy, execute them. I've been seeing that a lot, and I mean, I knew it was in reference to at least the Imperium of Man, but I didn't know why. Like, what was the reasoning behind it as far as just the meme itself went. But also, I might be a little biased as far as being more curious, at least at this point, about the Astartes or Space Marines. Someone's gonna be like, he just pronounced Astartes wrong, heresy, execute him. I'm very curious to know more about them, but specifically in their recruitment process, or the training that they're gonna go through before they actually become full-fledged Astartes. And I'm going to be watching that one from Luetin09 channel. Especially right now, just because he really explained things in a way that didn't make me feel overwhelmed, I guess. I mean, I still was a little bit, but not too much. So as of right now, just comment down below if there's a specific race that you would really be down, I guess, to be a part of, right? I mean, for me, as of right now, it'd be, I mean, I would like to be a Space Marine, but I don't think I can handle what they go through from the comments that I read. But I would very much like to be with the Tau, just because I would like to experience all the different races, or the races who have been there with them as far as working together and all that. But that's gonna go ahead and do it for this video. Don't forget to like, subscribe, it really does help me out a lot. Just like if you didn't like it, it helps me improve the channel. If you're curious to see what's coming up next, check the description down below. You're gonna see a list of about 5. Top to bottom is gonna be how I view them. Lots of Warhammer 40k content gonna be coming up, going back and forth between Warhammer and SCP. But until then, I'll see you on the next video. Bye.